In 1990, a billionaire secretly adopted 5 abandoned kids 35 years later. Their story stuns the world. In 1990, Marcus Langley's life seemed flawless from the outside. Billionaire, mogul, philanthropist, a man whose name appeared on every magazine cover, whose investments dictated markets, whose presence in a room turned heads. Yet behind the skyscrapers and polished suits, behind the multi-million-dollar parties and red carpet appearances, Marcus carried a silence no fortune could fill. He had wealth beyond imagining, yet he felt a hollow ache in his chest, a quiet longing for something money could never buy: connection, purpose, the kind of love that couldn't be negotiated. It was during one of his rare late-night drives through the outskirts of the city that he saw them. 5 children huddled together beneath the flickering light of a broken street lamp, shivering in tattered clothes, eyes wide with both fear and trust. No adults around. Just 5 little lives left abandoned on the edge of nowhere. Marcus's car slowed. He didn't know why he stopped. Maybe it was the sight of their small hands clutching one another, the instinctive bond of siblings, or the gnawing reminder of his own childhood, a boy who had known loss before he even understood it. But what happened next would change Marcus's life forever, in a way no one could have predicted. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because this is a story you won't want to miss, a story of love, sacrifice, and a secret that stayed hidden for decades. Marcus had built empires. He had power. He had influence. Yet here, on this rain-slicked street, none of that mattered. He stepped out of his car, approached the children, and for the first time in years, felt a trembling of the heart that money had never caused. They did not cry at first. They simply stared, wary, as if they could sense the weight of the world in him as well. And in that silent exchange, a decision rooted in something far deeper than philanthropy was made. He would take them in. The world would never know. Marcus was meticulous in secrecy. No press, no announcements, no fanfare. Every adoption was filed under layers of corporate trusts, legal entities and private foundations. People who might recognize the children from orphanages or foster homes never crossed paths with Marcus's carefully curated life. He became a father to 5 children whose names he had given, whose lives he had vowed to protect, all while maintaining the appearance of the untouchable billionaire. The first months were not easy. Luxury could not replace warmth or guidance. The children had known hunger, fear, and neglect. Their first nights in Marcus's sprawling mansion were haunted by nightmares, whispered questions, and tears that soaked through designer sheets. Marcus, despite his wealth, learned quickly that love demanded patience, attention, and sacrifice, none of which could be bought. He rearranged his schedule, forgoing board meetings and private jets, to attend school drop-offs, doctor visits, and late-night homework sessions. He learned which food calmed their stomachs and which lullabies eased their fears. Slowly, walls of mistrust crumbled, replaced by a fragile emerging bond. As years passed, Marcus watched transformation take root. The children, once silent and withdrawn, began to laugh. They filled the empty hallways of the mansion with games, mischief, and song. Their personalities blossomed, the eldest, determined and thoughtful, always protecting the younger ones. The middle two, inseparable in mischief and loyalty. The youngest, tender and fiercely imaginative. Marcus often found himself standing quietly at the top of the grand staircase, watching them tumble through life's chaos, realizing that wealth had finally found its true purpose, not in bank accounts or yachts, but in moments like these, in laughter echoing through the corridors, in tiny hands gripping his own. Yet the world outside never knew the full story. Friends, colleagues, and society assumed Marcus's philanthropy extended only to boards, charities, and foundation work. Few suspected the 5 children whose lives he had claimed in secret, guiding them through trauma, education, and discipline. Marcus chose anonymity not out of shame, but to shield them from a world that would reduce their stories to gossip, headlines, or pity. They were protected, nurtured, and loved in silence, a quiet revolution of family born from choice, not obligation. By the mid-2000s, the children had grown into teenagers, resilient and capable, yet still anchored by the man who had rescued them from the shadows. Marcus observed their first awkward steps into independence with pride, realizing that the sacrifices of sleepless nights, constant vigilance and unseen battles were finally paying off. Education, self-respect and confidence took root where fear had once thrived. Marcus had given them not just safety, but identity, a foundation that could withstand both adversity and the glare of scrutiny that awaited them outside the mansion walls. And yet life had its own designs. As the children reached adulthood, the careful secrecy Marcus had maintained became increasingly fragile. Friends noticed absences. Employees whispered of unknown heirs. Even in his careful world of private planes and hidden foundations, the threads of truth began to weave their way toward the public eye. Marcus understood that one day, the story of the 5 children, the abandoned ones, he had secretly embraced, would emerge. How, when, or if the world would accept it remained unknown. But he also knew one truth: no headline, no scandal, no judgment could ever diminish the bond that had been forged in the quietest corners of his mansion. Marcus often reflected on that night in 1990, on the street where 5 lives had intersected with his own. That singular choice had redirected the course of countless destinies, crafting a family invisible to the world, yet indelibly real. The children, once fragile and trembling, had become living proof of resilience, courage, and the quiet, transformative power of love. The story of that night, and every sacrifice that followed, was far from over. It was merely the beginning of a journey that would one day stun the world. By 2025, Marcus Langley was no longer the untouchable, enigmatic billionaire he had once been. Age had carved its lines into his face, slowed his steps, and silenced some of his earlier ambitions. Yet his eyes still held the clarity and resolve of the man who had once found 5 abandoned children under a broken street lamp. The mansion, once echoing with the laughter and cries of little feet, had become a living museum of memories, photographs on walls, trophies of small victories, and remnants of a life he had quietly dedicated to others. The 5 children, now adults, had grown into striking, accomplished individuals. Each had taken a different path, shaped not only by the love Marcus had given, but by the resilience they had cultivated themselves. The eldest, strong and principled, had become a leading educator, dedicating her life to children who had been left behind, much like she once had. The second and third, inseparable since the night Marcus first held them, thrived in artistic and humanitarian careers, blending creativity with compassion, their names quietly resonant in circles of influence. The youngest 2, tender and fiercely intelligent, had carved out paths in science and social work, proving that the environment Marcus had nurtured allowed potential to flourish, even when life had offered little at the start. The public, however, had yet to know their story. For decades, Marcus had maintained the secret, guarding their lives as fiercely as he had the fortune that surrounded him. But the world has a way of unearthing truths too powerful to remain hidden forever. A journalist, chasing whispers of philanthropy beyond the headlines, had uncovered fragments, documents, photographs, and testimonies hinting at a secret family raised in anonymity. When the first feature article ran, the internet, social media, and news outlets exploded. Comments ranged from awe to disbelief. A billionaire, adopting not 1, but 5 abandoned children, shielding them from scrutiny while raising them into accomplished adults. For Marcus, the media storm mattered little. What mattered was the reunion that had quietly been planned for years, a gathering of the 5 adults in the mansion that had once been their entire world. One by one, they arrived, no cameras, no fanfare, just the unspoken bond that had tethered them to Marcus for decades. As they stepped into the grand hall, now lined with paintings and photographs, documenting milestones both small and monumental, the weight of the years seemed to dissolve. They were not children anymore. They were the living embodiment of courage, love, and resilience. Marcus watched them move through the space, noting how each had carried pieces of their shared past. The eldest lingered by the piano, recalling late-night music lessons. The second and third examined a gallery of artwork that had once been scribbled on walls and scraps of paper. The youngest two paused before photographs of birthdays and school recitals, memories that had stitched the family together. Marcus felt a swell in his chest, realizing that each life he had touched had in turn flourished beyond what he had ever imagined. The reunion became a quiet celebration, one that did not require words. Shared glances, gentle touches, laughter that had been dormant for decades, all spoke of the love that had survived secrets, time, and trials. Marcus felt the culmination of every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt dissolve into this singular truth. The children he had rescued, the lives he had nurtured, were now their own. They were not defined by abandonment, nor by the secrecy that had shielded them. They were defined by resilience, choice, and the unwavering force of love. The news, of course, could not be contained forever. Soon the story spread, not as a fleeting headline, but as a viral testament to human kindness. People across the globe were captivated, not by Marcus's wealth, but by the audacity of his decision to adopt and nurture lives society had written off. Articles, videos, and social media posts celebrated the family. Commentators marveled at how the 5 adults had not only survived, but excelled in every sphere: educators, artists, scientists, social advocates. Some were skeptical, questioning motives or timing, but those who understood recognized the profundity of a love that required no audience. In quiet moments, Marcus reflected on the journey. He remembered the night he found them, shivering beneath a flickering street lamp. He remembered the countless nights awake, holding tiny hands and soothing fears that no adult should have known. He remembered the chaos, the laughter, the tears, the whispered promise to Anne that had set it all in motion. And now, watching the adults he had raised, seeing them step into the world with dignity, compassion, and achievement, he knew that the promise had not only been kept, it had blossomed into something far greater than he could have envisioned. The 5 children, now fully grown, had each chosen their own way forward. Yet they returned to Marcus not out of obligation, but out of love. Together, they stood as a testament to the extraordinary possibilities that arise when someone dares to act. When the world hesitates, the mansion, once a fortress of secrecy, had become a beacon of hope. The billionaire who had secretly adopted 5 abandoned children had given them something no fortune could buy: a family, a legacy, and a proof that one life's choice could ripple across decades to transform many. Marcus knew the world would remember this story. Headlines would call it miraculous. Viral videos would frame it as extraordinary. But for him, the true triumph was quiet, intimate, and eternal. In the laughter, in the gentle touches, in the shared silences of 5 lives once abandoned, he witnessed a love that had been carefully nurtured, fiercely protected, and finally, gloriously realized. And in that moment, Marcus Langley understood a truth more valuable than all his wealth. The richest man is not he who owns the world, but he who creates it for others and allows love to shape the future. Tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with all of you.